Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopijana Bhalava Giribharadhari. Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Ashtotara Shatashimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantharaj Shiman Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shishiguru and Shigoranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, the Summon Bonon, Chapter 87, Prayers by the Personified Vedas, text number 37. Najat idam agra asha nababishyat ato nidanat. Let's wait for a little bit then. Got it, everybody? 37, yeah. Okay. Najat idam agra ashana bhavishyat atoni dhanat. Najat idam agra ashana nabhishyat atoni dhanat. Anumitan antaratyaji vipati mrishai karashe. Atopami yate dravina jate bikalpapathair. Vitatamanubhilasam ritam ityavayantyabhudha. Najat idam agra asha nababishyat atanidanat anumitam antarathyaji vibhavati mrishaikharashay uta upami jate dravina jatipi kalpapathair Vitatamanubhilasam ritam itya vajantya bhudha. Please chant. Naja idam agra asha nababishyat ato nidhanat anumitam antaratyaji vibhati mrisha ikkarase ata upamijatya jatipi kalpapathair Vitatamanubhilasam ritam itya vajantya bhudha. Najat idam agra asha nababishyat ato nidhanat anomitam antaratyaji vibhati mrisha ikkarase ata upime jate dravi na jati vikalpa pathair Vitatamanubhilasam ritya itya avajantya bhudha Naja idam agra ashana bhavishyat atoni dhanat nanomitam antaratyaji vibhati mrisha ikkarase ata upami jate dravi na jati vikalpa pathair Vitatamanubhilasam ritam itya vajantya bhudha Naja idam agra ashana bhavishyat atoni dhanad anumitam antaratyaji vibhati mrisha ikkarase ata upami jate dravi na jati vikalpa pathair Vitatamanubhilasam ritam itya vajantya bhudha na not yet because idam this universe agre In the beginning, Asha existed, Nabhavishyat, it will not exist. Ataha, hence, Nidhanat Anu, after its annihilation, Mitam, deduce, Antara, in the meantime, Twayi, within you, Bibhati, he appears, Mrisha, false, Ekarase, whose experience of a spiritual ecstasy is unchanging. Ataha, thus, Upamiyate, it is understood by comparison. Dravina, of material substance, Yati, in the categories, Vikalpa, of the transformations, Patai, with the varieties, Vitatha, contrary to fact, Manaha, of the mind, Vilasam, fantasy, Ritam, real, Iti, so, Avajanti, think, Abuddha, the unintelligent. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Since this universe did not exist prior to its creation and will not longer exist after its annihilation, we conclude that in the interim it is nothing more than manifestation of imagined to be visible. Sorry, I'm going to read that again. We conclude that in the interim, it is not more than a manifestation imagined to be visible within you, whose spiritual enjoyment never changes. We liken, is how you say that? We liken this universe to the transformation of various material substances into diverse forms. Certainly, those who believe that this figment of the imagination is substantially real are less intelligent. Purport. Having thus defeated all attempts of the ritualistics to prove the substantial reality of material creation, the personified Vedas now present positive evidence to the contrary, that this world is unreal and that is temporary, in that it is temporary. Before the creation of the universe and after its dissolution, I'm reading something funny today. Only the spiritual reality of the Supreme Lord, along with his abode and entourage, continue to exist. The Shrutis confirm this, Atmava idam eka evagra asit. Quote, prior to the creation of the universe, only the self existed. End of quote. Aitareya Upanishad 1.1. Na sat asin no, sat asit tadanim. Quote, at that time, neither the subtle nor the gross aspect of matter were present. End of quote. Rig Veda 10.129.1. One can understand the relativity of creation by an analogy. When basic materials like clay and metal are processed and shaped into various products, the created objects exist separately from the clay and metal only in name and form. The basic substance remains unchanged, Similarly, when the energies of the Supreme Lord are transformed into the known things of this world, these things exist separately from Him only in name and form. In the Chandogya Upanishad 6.1.4 to 6, the sage Udalaka explained a similar analogy to his son. Yatha saumaikena mritpindena sarvan mrinmayam vigyatan syat bacharavanam vikaro namadheyam mritiketi evashatyam. Quote, for example, my dear boy, by understanding a single lump of clay, one can understand everything made of clay, from clay. The existence of transformed products is only a creation of language, a matter of assigning designations. The clay alone is real. End of quote. In conclusion, there is no convincing evidence that the things of this world are eternal or substantial, while there is overwhelming evidence that they are temporary and conditioned by false designations. Therefore, only the ignorant can take the imaginary permutations of matter to be real. Sridhar Swami prayers, Mukuta Kundala Kankana Kinkini Parinatang Kanakam Paramarthatha Mahat Ahankriti Ka Pramukham Tatha Nara Harer Na Parampara Marthatha. Quote, transformations of gold such as crowns, earring bangles, and ankle bells are not ultimately separate from gold itself. Similarly, the material elements headed by the Mahat, false ego, and ether are not ultimately separated from Lord Narahari. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurube Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasaya Bhutale Srimate Ramapada Swami Iti Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirveshesha Shunyavadi Pashatyade Shatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripasindu Vyaivacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. It is quite extraordinary to hear directly from the personified Vedas the philosophy of the absolute truth. We see that there are 6 main schools of philosophy to understand the absolute truth. And they derive all the conclusions through analyzing these truths that are propounded in the Vedic scriptures. And in one sense, you take that information, you process it, and then you come with some type of understanding. So of the 6 philosophical treatises, or the 6 philosophical schools, only one of them is able to fully present the complete conclusion of the Vedas. And that is the Vedanta. It's called the Vedanta school. All the other ones, Karma Mimamsa, the Yoga Sutras, the what is the one that Lord Kapila Dev, Sankhya. There is, I can't remember the other two. Logic, which is Nyaya, and there's one more. So all these, they take a particular aspect of the absolute truth. They take a particular perspective, but it's not complete. It's not the full thing. The explanation that our acharyas give is the example of the blind man, many blind men trying to explain an elephant. So they're all able to particularly describe an element of the elephant that they're in contact with. But it's just a part of the elephant. It's not the full thing. So one blind man is holding to the leg of the elephant and trying to understand it and say, oh no, the elephant is like a pillar. Someone is holding the tail, oh, the elephant is like a rope. Someone is holding the ears, the elephant is like a fan. Someone is touching the torso of the elephant. Oh, this elephant is like a wall. Someone is grabbing the trunk. Oh, this elephant is like a hose or something like that, a snake or something. So they all have a partial description of the elephant, but not the whole thing. So here the Vedas themselves are establishing this fact, are establishing the full absolute truth. And they do it in such a wonderful way, which is, in one sense, philosophy, that from all the different perspectives. What we're hearing right now is the absolute truth from the perspective of the Supreme, or from the perspective of eternity. So from the perspective of eternity, then this cosmic manifestation is an illusion. It doesn't exist. Previously, they were establishing, from the perspective of the temporary, the material world, there are differences. From the perspective of eternity, there is no difference. It's just one thing. So, without being properly directed by someone who have the full picture of the truth, then there is no chance. There is no chance to understand. And there is something further too, that there is a whole process given in the scriptures and given by Krishna himself, actually, the creator, of how to be able to receive that truth, how to be able to connect to that truth, to the absolute truth, the complete thing. There is a process, there's a system. And to be able to enter into that system, one has to fully accept the system given of Krishna exclusively. It's a conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is such a wonderful book. In one sense, you see, we have here, especially in this chapter, because it's the Vedas themselves speaking. So you expect a very profound philosophy. It's a philosophy of the absolute truth. So all these different aspects of philosophy, logic, the Sankhya, in one sense, the analysis, the deep analysis of all the different elements, the different perspective, everything is covered by philosophy. All this vast, deep body of philosophy that is contained in the Vedas, in the Bhagavad Gita is given in a very elementary way, but fully complete. Everything is presented. The philosophy of the Vedas is presented in the Bhagavad Gita in a way that is tailored for people like most of us, who are very much invested still in the material world. So Arjuna is taking the position of a conditioned living entity, although he is an eternal liberated associate, Nitya Mukta Bhakta. For the sake of facilitating Krishna, delivering that guidelines to us, then he takes a position of being bewildered by the material nature. So for those who are bewildered by material nature, then Krishna give the Bhagavad Gita. And in the Bhagavad Gita, there is the process of how to become free, and there is the guidelines, and there is a philosophy in a very complete but simple. Simple. So all these truths are given in the Bhagavad Gita. All this that is presented in this chapter is given in the Bhagavad Gita. And when it comes to this part, there is a famous verse in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. In the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the beginning part of the Bhagavad Gita, but the beginning of Krishna's instructions is Sankhya. And in Sankhya philosophy, in a nutshell, is to understand the difference between matter and spirit. And Krishna established that in the beginning. It's the most basic understanding to be able to enter into the depth of the philosophy, the Vedic philosophy, or the understanding of the absolute truth. One has to come to a basic understanding of the difference between matter and spirit. Now, there is a very simplistic difference between matter and spirit. In general, when we go and preach, matter is temporary, matter is always changing. Spirit, the spiritual energy, is eternal, and it doesn't change. It's everlasting. But there is much more to it. And there is much things that comes as questions of this simple statement. He is unfolding a whole body of knowledge in each of these simple sutras that are there in terms of describing matter and spirit. So, in the second chapter, after Krishna tells Arjuna that your spirit soul, you're eternal, and you're going through these different bodies. So you're changing your bodies, you're transmigrating through different bodies. And if you're a Dhira, if you're sober, if you're educated, if you're a person of knowledge, if you're a progressive person who is inquiring about the absolute truth or open to that, then you don't become bewildered by these things. So why is Krishna telling that? Because Arjuna is bewildered about the fact that he's going to be engaged in a battle in which death is, he's facing either his death or the death of others. And specifically for him, it was very conflicting to be the vehicle by which, or the instrument of the death of people that were very dear and worshipable to him. So Krishna is telling that to be bewildered by these changes, this transmigration, birth and death, is unintelligent, is un-Aryan. It's not how an Aryan person speaks, a civilized person. It's something that is unintelligent, is uneducated, is bewildered. It doesn't represent what Arjuna is supposed to be. So Krishna chastises him. And then he goes on to explain that a person who understands this, that in the same way that the soul is going through all these changes. And as you go through these changes, you have to be titiksha. You have to be sober, you have to tolerate, you have to understand the things. And then he goes to say, Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate shata. Which is quite a beautiful poetic arrangement. You know, the Bhagavad Gita is to be sung. And Gita is a song. And Krishna is such a wonderful poet. Na sato vidyate bhavo. Na sato, and then you switch it. Na bhavo vidyate shata. So that of this is such, like in this phrase, the whole explanation that are given by the Vedas in the last few verses is just put in just this very poetic phrase. Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate shata. That of the non-existence, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, there is no change. So it's a simple phrase. It's like a sutra, but to unpack it, is wonderful. And he say, ubayor api dristantas. So ubayor, these two things. There is the drishta anta. The drishta is you observe, you analyze, you study them. And then antas means you conclude. The conclusion after a study, these two things, is that they come to that understanding. that of the non-existent there is no endurance, and of the eternal there is no change. And who understand this? The Tattvadarshis. The Tattvadarshis are those who have full understanding of the absolute truth. Perfect understanding. The Tattvadarshis. Later in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna said, you want to learn this, common fellow? You want to learn, you have to approach a Tattvadarshi. Tadvidhi pranipatina pariprasnena sevaya upadeshanti te gyanan. What is it? Jnanaman, no. Jnana, let's see. Jnaninas tattvadarshina. Jnaninas tattvadarshina. So you approach a tattvadarshi to learn this truth. The tattvadarshi is able to explain the absolute truth, complete like that. Without a tattvadarshi, no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's going to be incomplete. It's going to be incomplete. So, the analysis of these two things and coming to this conclusion. So, our acharyas unpack in a very simple way this truth, this sutra. Because we're speaking here, yesterday, Krishna Archana was speaking about the same subject matter in terms of the non-existence. When we talk about the non-existence, and this is nabhavo, non-existence, that have no existence. Non-existent, if we talk in an absolute way, non-existent is there's nothing there. There's nothing. And then there's another thing that is a little puzzling too. When you say, just to say the non-existent, there is no endurance. If it doesn't exist, yesterday was part of the discussion. If it doesn't exist, what is the question of endurance or non-endurance? If it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. And the Vedas, the personified Vedas, are declaring that to be an illusion that comes within. They declare as an illusion. Actually, the Vedas are speaking from the perspective of the Lord. So we talked about that later. But just keep analyzing this. Nabhavo vidyate shata. So Krishna, when he's talking about this, he's not talking necessarily of non-existent in an absolute way. And this becomes clear because it's defined by the full phrase. Nashato vidyate bhavo. Nashato vidyate bhavo. Nashato, of the non-existent, there is no endurance. Well, that means the definition of nashato is that it's temporary. So he's speaking from that perspective. He's making that point that the illusion is that it's temporary. That is temporary. And when he speaks of nabhavo, of the eternal, there is no change. So it's defining that spirit have no change, Matter is temporary. And that's the definition that is given. And from that definition, we can understand what is real and what is not. When it's temporary, then the examples, there's many examples that are given by our acharyas to understand that principle. One is explained here like a dream. In a dream, we have the experience while we're dreaming. There's a real experience that we're going through. A tiger is chasing and you're afraid, your heart is palpitating, all these things. But when you wake up, there is no substance to that. There is no reality. So the temporary experience while you're dreaming have no substance at the end. But while you're dreaming, there is an experience. It's a real thing. Another example that is given is actually there's a story on this. Prabhupada once was given the class, and he was talking from the perspective of like explaining that our existence is an illusion from the perspective of the absolute. Our experience is an illusion. And this world is also an illusion. So it's not real. There's no reality. There's no substance. So he's explaining like this. And therefore, we have to break from that illusion. And then a simple disciple of Srila Prabhupada was meditating on this class. There's a story that is given in Prabhupada's pastime. And then he wanted to test this instruction. So if it's an illusion, if it doesn't exist, and the material world doesn't exist, so I'm meditating like that and I'm going to walk through a wall. And then obviously he hit the wall and he banged himself. And then he explained to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I've had this experience. And Prabhupada explained, you have to understand the meaning of non-existence, of illusion. The meaning of illusion is that it's temporary. So he made that point. So it's important because we see that for impersonalists, they take this word non-existent as absolute. And they declare that material energy or the material manifestation does not exist. But the problem that they find is that they cannot explain where is this material energy or where is this material world comes from. They cannot explain two things. Where is the material world that this material manifestation comes from, and how is that the spirit soul becomes covered by material manifestation. These two things are very difficult for an impersonalist to explain. But in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that very clearly. He says that this material energy is his Bahu Shakti, is his external energy, is his eternal energy. So from the perspective of the Lord, the material energy is eternal, is divine. He calls it Daivi Shakti, his divine energy of this material nature. And it's eternal because from the eternal comes eternal. The energies of the Lord are just as the Lord, are eternal, are divine. So from that perspective, this energy is divine and eternal. So, but it's an energy, it comes from the Lord. Now, the manifestations, and this is the example of the clay that is given here, the forms and the designations that comes from this eternal energy, they all are temporary manifestations, and therefore they're considered by those who are tattvadarshi to have no substance. So Srila Prabhupada explains that the process of devotional service is the means to understand the Supreme Lord in his Bhagavan feature, and from there, by devotional service, the full manifestation of knowledge becomes manifest. Two things actually develop from devotional service, loving devotional service. Vairagya and Jnana. So with the full understanding, then one can very easily have an understanding of this, the Acharyas call it self-evident truth. And you can appreciate, how the fact is that this self-evident truth becomes revealed within your heart, or becomes actually established in one sense within your heart. When you actually see that so many persons with so much capacity, completely, they don't get it. It just skipped them. It's very difficult. So the process of devotional service is simple. But Prabhupada explains, and actually not only Prabhupada, Krishna explains that it requires the cultivation of transcendental knowledge. It requires that we do study and cultivate transcendental knowledge. So the Bhagavad Gita gives us the basics, but then it comes, the Srimad Bhagavatam that goes into depth into the philosophy of bhakti. And it's important because there's three very basic truths that are required, that are actually important, that why to cultivate, why to go deeper into these philosophical subject matters, to understand simple things as the difference between matter and spirit, and how the manifestations are temporary, and therefore they're considered an illusion, they're considered not substantial. So these very important three truths that are there. One is to understand what's important, to understand what is real. So if we have true philosophy and understanding of what is real and what is illusion, then that immediately creates a whole sense of purpose for oneself, of how we have to act, and what is then from that, from what is real, then we can understand what is really matter, what is the things that really matter for us. Yesterday I was giving a class to some students in UIC, and the discussion was about the importance of focusing on the things that real matter, which is your spiritual cultivation, because that becomes the foundation of whatever you build in your life. If we don't pay attention to that, it becomes impossible to balance our regular life. So, what is important, what really matters, and how can we live in a way that matters? So, these things comes from the deep study of philosophy, and through that study of philosophy, it becomes like a glue between these two opposite things: actions in this material world and the activities that will elevate us to perfection, to self-realization. So so it's wonderful to hear this chapter goes throughout. Is so much philosophy, both in the analysis of the acharyas and the descriptions given by the Vedas themselves. Is a full picture. Is a very deep understanding from all perspectives. Throughout all the prayers, from the very beginning, all the prayers are analyzing the full perspective of the absolute truth. And is always coming to the conclusion that it's all meant to understand Krishna, and wants to understand Krishna to engage in his loving devotional service. That truth is fully established. And I finish with this because the pastime of the appearance of the Bhagavatam, or the narration of the Bhagavatam by Srila Sukadev Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit, is very much helping establish that absolute truth in an environment that was full of the so many varieties and diverse understandings of that absolute truth, represented by different schools of philosophy. When Maharaj Parikshit decided to fast, waiting for the snake to bite, for him to die, all the different sages of the world, with all their disciples of the universe, actually, they came to the place where Maharaj Parikshit was sitting down, fasting. Sukrabat. We went there last year, placed by the Ganges. All these different rishis and munis who represent all these schools of thought, they were there. And prior to the arrival of Maharaj, of Sukadev Goswami, they couldn't agree because they have different perspective. Maharaj Parikshit, with full gratitude, asked them, the sages, everybody was there, Jaimini, Vyasadev, Narada, Kapila, Patanjali, everybody was there. Every sage was there with the schools and the disciples. They came because they wanted to actually assist Maharaj Parikshit. They sincerely wanted Maharaj Parikshit to serve Maharaj Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit, with great gratitude, he asked them to please instruct him in what is the most important thing that a person who is about to die should do. And they all have an opinion. But there was a whole bunch of diverse opinions according to the perspective of the school that they represented. And they couldn't come to an agreement. They were basically divided into two camps. The Vedantis, or the impersonalists, and the Bhaktas. In the Bhaktas were Vyasadev, Narada, like that, Asita, Devala. On the impersonalists, there were Jaimini, there were Patanjali, and this and that. For the Vedantis, the impersonalists, they wanted someone who is Brahman realized. They thought, because they couldn't agree, it is explained that Narada Muni came with this solution. Well, let's choose one person to be the spoken person. And to choose that person, they couldn't agree either. They couldn't agree what was the real thing to do. They couldn't agree in one person. That person should be someone who is Brahman realized and who is fully renounced. And the devotees wanted someone who is a devotee, who is a perfect, premi bhakta. But they couldn't agree. But then, at that moment, Sukadev Goswami arrived. And then when they got to know that it's Sukadev Goswami was known that from birth he was Brahman realized. So they say, oh yeah, this 1 week, and the devotees, they knew he was perfect devotee. So he is the one that was chosen. And immediately Sukadev Goswami established from the very beginning, second canto, the first instruction, that the thing to do is to be absorbed in the hearing and chanting of the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Maharaj Parikshit was very, very happy to hear that because he's a bhakta. And then he goes on, Maharaj Parikshit asked questions to Srila Sukadev Goswami to help the other schools of philosophy to understand the absolute truth from that full perspective. And so the Bhagavatam is given. So it's important to absorb oneself in the teachings of the Bhagavatam because it covers all that. It covers perfectly all these aspects of to properly understand the absolute truth from the perspective of or under the shelter of someone who is perfectly situated in the absolute truth. Perfect, Tattvadarshi. And through that, then we get it. We receive it. And that's the system. Any comments or questions?
just share one thing that makes it a little easier for me to understand when I look up the different words. Because the English language is so, it's like in English language they have like one word, but they'll have 1, 2, 3 different meanings in different situations or contexts. The word will have different meaning. So whenever I was looking up the word real and the word exist, and they have words like real, they have words like exist, they have words like illusory, the word dream, when they talk about the subject matter. And it's really, for me personally, it's a lot easier when I remember that the Sanskrit language is a perfect language. And so through these different words in Sanskrit, it's a lot easier to conceive of the difference between temporary and that which is not temporary. Because Prabhupada used the word unreal in the translation. And by Srimad Bhagavatam 111, he uses the word unreal. And I remember looking that up, and the word unreal means more like a mirage in the desert or something. It basically just means temporary. So for me personally, I just keep it simple as that. Temporary, the material is temporary, the spiritual world is eternal. I'm eternal, so I should stick with these. So.
Thanks, Ru. Anything else?
Thanks for the nice answer. One of the things that set me to thinking about is it's not so hard to get people to accept that there's matter and spirit. There's a difference between them. But going beyond that and understanding, even for myself, understanding the difference between the gross and subtle, which in one sense is another word for matter and spirit, but in another sense we can get a little into the Shanti system and start breaking it down. It's a little bit more minute definition. So now I'm really thinking about being able to clearly distinguish, okay, this is what spirit is. This is what matter is. And within the matter, this is what is gross and what is subtle. Because a lot of the people that I talk to can't make that distinction between gross and subtle, and sometimes confuse subtle or spirit. So if you have anything to...
Yeah. Actually, yesterday we were talking about that. One of the students was saying that one of the things that appreciated very much and touched her in particular was listening Krishna's explanation. And she liked the transmigration one, how's it go now? Now I've got a blank. The 213 Tehinos Minjata Dehe verse. To get a sense, I mean, and I asked this question, for example, actually, asked the student, so you remember when you were 7 years old? And then, oh yes, I remember. So the fact that you were, what Prabhupada makes a point, because you were present there, you were present to all your bodies, and you're conscious of all of them. So your body is changing, your mind is changing. The fact is that you have a different mentality. That different mentality now than when you were a 7-year-old girl. And your intelligence is changing. You're also much wiser right now because of the experience of many years. So all these things that are changing, you're conscious, but all these things are gone. But that consciousness, being conscious, remains there constantly. So you were present. And also use the classical children example, point out at your nose. Prabhupada say that. Point out at your heart. Now point out at yourself. So, so it's wonderful, like I was saying, the simple way that we've been receiving this knowledge, like elementary, ABC type of thing. But then it goes, as we're reading in this chapter, it can go really, really deep in a much more, complex. And the very first thing for us that this student was saying, actually, yeah, I can see now the difference because I'm conscious. So consciousness is a symptom of the soul, I was explaining, so they really connected to that. So I can see the difference between consciousness, the soul, and the changing bodies, subtle and gross. But then here also we go even deeper, that, which is appreciating that is not just that, but is to understand that this whole thing about illusion and temporary, how we relate to something that it have no substance, but we experience. I'm sitting down in this. Yesterday my wife was speaking about that. The experience of this is real. This is not. So how is that this is not real? So it becomes more like, okay, how we explain that? So then it is the explanation of the temporary. But then if you say there's more questions than come. If it's all temporary, if we have no substance, if it's, it's something that is flickering, it comes and goes. So right now exists, tomorrow it doesn't exist, But then how about karma? Karma, as this body is finished, karma remains. So, so karma goes beyond, the bodies that we have. So, okay, so how is that also function different? Is that also doesn't change, it just goes through? But then, and understanding that from the perspective of eternity is irrelevant. Even karma becomes irrelevant. Everything becomes irrelevant, like it doesn't exist. They have no substance because of the temporary nature from the perspective of eternity. So there was given an example that there's certain experience that we have, in terms of action and reaction. Suppose when you were a child and you were playing a sport, baseball, football, something, and you were very invested into the sport and you lose, and you were very upset about losing at that time when you were, 10-year-old. At that time, it was very, very a real experience of disappointment. But now, as an adult, does it have any consequence that of having lost that event or that sport? No, it doesn't. Maybe when you remember, you think, oh, not important. Actually, very nice lesson or something. But it doesn't do anything to you right now. So, yeah, it's really important to go deeper and deeper. I guess it's like education. You go to elementary, but then you go to graduate and you go to postgraduate, like that. And we go more and more understanding about the things. So, yeah, I'm going to finish here. Grantara Shiman Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Thank you so much, everybody.